On this Ash Wednesday, we begin our journey through Lent to Holy Week and finally to Easter. And like any well-prepared traveler, we confess that we want to pack our bags to make sure we are comfortable for our 6-week journey. But Ash Wednesday is really about leaving our baggage, our past behind, and braving the unknown, carrying nothing but the mark of God's beloved. In this vulnerable place we are, in this sanctuary, in your home, in our hearts, we confess that we want to be surrounded by all the things that make us feel better about ourselves, including the things we think that God needs in order to love us. And yet God whispers to us that we are made in the divine image and that faithfulness to that knowledge is all we need for this journey. So let us ponder what it is that we may let go of this Lent in order to help us to hear more clearly the stories of Jesus' extravagant love for all and to follow him more bravely and confidently. During this service, we will have the burning of the ashes here, and I invite you to, right now, put this on pause if you need to get an oven-safe container of some kind of pan you might use to bake food, to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and on that piece of paper, write down a word, a sentence, a picture of something you want to let go of this Lent, something that is holding you back from committing yourself to God. And when it comes time for burning the ashes, as I burn this palm branch from 2 years ago, I want you to burn that piece of paper. And once it's cooled, take your finger and just dab it in there and do the sign of the cross on your forehead, on your hand, even if you just want to do the sign of the cross in the container, as we do a different kind of Ash Wednesday. Let us continue our worship together as we move into the season of Lent. From the 58th chapter of Isaiah. Shout out, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why do we fast, but you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Look, you serve your own interests on your fast day, and you oppress all your workers. Look, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush, to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to God? Is not this the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the homeless poor into your homes, when you see the naked to cover them, and not hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you, and the glory of God shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and God will answer. You shall cry for help, and God will say, here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. And God will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong. And you shall be like watered gardens, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall rise up and raise the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in.
A reading from the prophet Joel. Blow the trumpet in Zion, sound the alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of God is coming. It is near, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like blackness spread upon the mountains, a great and powerful army comes. Their like has never been seen from of old, nor will it be again after them in ages to come. Yet even now, says our God, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Rend your hearts and not your clothing. Return to your God, for God is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and relents from punishing. Who knows whether God will not turn and relent, and leave a blessing behind, a grain offering and a drink offering to God. Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the aged, gather the children, even infants at the breast. Let the bridegroom leave his room, and the bride her canopy. Between the vestibule and the altar, let the priests, the ministers of God, weep. Let them say, spare your people, O God, and do not make your heritage a mockery, a byword among the nations. Why should it be said among the peoples, where is their God?
From 2 Corinthians, the 5th and 6th chapter. We are ambassadors for Christ. Since God is making God's appeal through us, we entreat you on behalf of Christ. Be reconciled to God. For our sake, God made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. As we work together with him, we urge you also not to accept the grace of God in vain. For God says, at the acceptable time I have listened to you, and on a day of salvation I have helped you. See, now is the acceptable time. Now is the day of salvation. We are putting no obstacle in anyone's way so that no fault may be found with our ministry. But as servants of God, we have commended ourselves in every way, through great endurance, in afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, riots, labors, sleepless nights, hunger, by purity, knowledge, patience, kindness, holiness of spirit, genuine love, truthful speech, and the power of God, with the weapons of righteousness for the right hand and for the left, in honor and dishonor, in ill repute and good repute. We are treated as impostors and yet are true, as unknown and yet are well known, as dying and see we are alive, as punished and yet not killed, as sorrowful yet always rejoicing, as poor yet making many rich, as having nothing and yet possessing everything. Our gospel is from Matthew, the 6th chapter. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from God in heaven. Whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. And when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, for your God who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not pray like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others, but by God who sees in secret. And God who sees in secret will reward you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. May God bless the reading and the hearing of the word. The point of Ash Wednesday is to remind ourselves of death. Well, that's a cheery start, isn't it? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's the language we hear at burials. It's a complete downer. A lot of churches don't have Ash Wednesday services. They barely have Lent because they don't want to think about the negative aspects. But the truth is, as I said this past Sunday in my sermon, you got to have the loss to experience the joy, don't we? We have to go through Good Friday to really appreciate Easter. Otherwise, we turn it into some silly, ridiculous festival with candy and anyway. We have to understand the root of our faith to understand who Jesus is and what it means. I think human beings should be realistic about who we are and what we become. I know it's pretty gross, but think about this. I mean, life, Paul talks about this. Life on this world, it's fleeting, it's short. These bodies, they waste away. They break down over time. It doesn't matter how long you live, it's still short. And the reality is, I think, that if we don't make the most of our lives here, we don't make the most of what God's given us. And honestly, the next place we go is in some ways dependent on what we've done here. In this world, Paul wrote, we are ambassadors for Christ. We represent God in the person of Jesus every day and in our own persons. It's an old idea. I mean, Isaiah says basically the same thing. We are expected to share our bread, to care for the homeless, to clothe the naked, to stay connected with one another, and to do God's work. It's not about phony practices and pomp and circumstance, liturgy for the sake of liturgy. It's all about how this makes us and molds us into better people. But of course, it catches us in a bit of a quandary. How are we supposed to be? I mean, that reading from Matthew is always a troubling one to me, I think. How are we supposed to live our faith publicly, but also privately? The problem I see is that we tend to experience, at least in a public sense, and what we see around us, we tend to experience the extremes. We see a lot of people wear their faith on their sleeves or use it as a weapon, or we see nothing at all as people resort to the old, my faith is a private matter argument. If nobody can see that you live a Jesus-centered life, is it really there? On the other hand, if everyone sees you using God as a club to beat people with, that isn't Jesus-centered either. I think our faith, it should be apparent and maybe understated. When I'm asked by people why I do what I do, why I said yes to this vocation, why I try to get others to say yes to their vocations, I say it's because I'm a follower of Jesus. I use that term now, not so much Christian. When asked if my faith is the only true faith, I reply that I think it's kind of disrespectful to say that. I think about the many good non-Christians I know, the many good Jews and Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, who do good for others. Often, I see their lives as being better examples of Jesus than the lives of a lot of public Christians I see. And it isn't that we're supposed to be perfect. Perfection is a trap, honestly. And it isn't that we really should be judging other people, I think. It's just that it's quite the opposite. There are expectations of us when we take on the name of Jesus. There are expectations of behavior and life. It's not that we have to live in poverty. Jesus never said everyone had to. But it is that if we live to excess and don't help anybody else and aren't generous, then we're failing him. We're not following the path. I say it a lot. I'll say it again. You can do good and you can do well. It's not a choice. I think what it means is that we should all do our best with what we have, what we've been given, the gifts that God has given us. We should see just how much faithful living can change the world. Our lives can change the world. Our lives can change others and help others and offer them hope. We can be examples and not obnoxious. You can do both. I think we've all been called to live a holy life. Yeah, I know that a holy life, piety, all these words have taken on some negative connotations because they've been abused. Holiness doesn't mean perfection. Just because you take on the name saint doesn't mean you're going to live a perfect life. I mean, I think that's a problem with the larger culture. And maybe today, this season of Lent, is a time for us to, again, remind ourselves of what holy living means. Holiness, the experience of the Spirit of God, is not some show-off time. It's not some time to say that I'm perfect and you aren't. It's a time when we say to ourselves, we've been down and someone helped us. Maybe we should do the same. We've had nothing and others have been generous to us. Maybe we should do the same. It's about serving God the best we can. To share what we have with those who don't have enough. We see it especially in our Isaiah reading. We see it, Joel is another one, and in our gospel reading. It's about doing for others. Not because you have to, but because you're called to, because you want to. I want to. I think many of us have more than enough. and there's enough to go around to others. I think we can change people's minds about the way they understand followers of Jesus and maybe their own lives. We can change our lives. We can become better. And I think also it's a way to remember that we are all in need of new life, new experiences of generosity, new hope for better times. So I invite you to do something meaningful this Lent. Don't practice meaningless self-denial or self-abasement. Don't walk around looking like you've been fasting for a week and oh so sad looking. But do feed the hungry. Do house the homeless. Do urge politicians who spend our tax money to spend it on those who are suffering. Do speak up for the moral causes that we all as Christians need to speak up about education, about the environment, about poverty, about food insecurity. Do be the change that you want to see in the world. Lent is a tool for improvement. It's not an excuse to look like you're in a state of misery. It's a time to remember this incredible gift of Jesus and what he went through in his life and how he gives us new life. Live a holy Lent. All of us, let's live a holy Lent so that on Easter we can say, yeah, we've been through it, but we've come out okay. So these are palm branches from 2 years ago. Since we were doing this online a year ago, and we use them to complete the circle of the year from one Lent to another. So we have these branches. You have your paper if you haven't written anything down or made something you want to release during this season, please do so. And then I want maybe you have a candle lit there, to light it and place it into your safe dish that you can burn it into. And after you're done, you can do the sign of the cross. They may just be barely visible. There may only be a few, but it's still ashes as a remembrance, a reminder. You can put the sign of the cross on your forehead or on your wrist, or you can just do the sign of the cross in the ashes themselves, remembering what it means to be in a season of repentance and renewal. So, we remember as we light these palm branches, these dried out branches, as a remembrance and a reminder of Jesus. And then we take these ashes and give ourselves a reminder. The sign of the cross, the sign of repentance, the sign of renewal, the sign of giving of ourselves to others, of living a generous life. So we are sent from this place as we received, reminded that from ashes we came, to ashes we return. It is a metaphor, but a fitting one. We leave this place, this time of worship, and we give thanks to God for all that we receive. Now receive the benediction. Blessings like God's love are not one-way experiences. As you have been blessed with the mark of God's love, now you are called to go out from this place and bless others with your lives. May the God who created you create opportunities for serving others. May the Christ who teaches you teach you during Lent how to love all. And may the spirit of gentleness be your companion through this Lenten journey. Go in the peace of Christ. Thanks be to God.